Hello and welcome to the video lecture for Chapter 2 from your Human Relations textbook. It's about self-motivation and goal setting. So when we talk about motivation, we want to ask the question, well, where does it come from? What does it do? So motivation is required to achieve success in work and personal life. So motivation is basically what keeps you moving, what gets you going, what gets you doing the things that you need to do. Okay. Goal setting goes along really well with motivation, and it means that you're going to be becoming more productive and putting out more quality work as well. And then self-discipline is going to help you achieve those goals. It's going to help you stay motivated to achieve those goals and keeps you moving in your life, okay? So motivation is very important in keeping you moving along. So when we talk about needs are something that, we need, right? It's an internal striving or an urge to do something. So we might talk about needs in terms of physical needs, things like food or water or shelter. We might talk about needs in terms of psychological needs. Maybe you have the need for recognition or camaraderie or friendship, you know. And then needs influence our motives. So our motive is our inner drive that moves a person to do something. So motives are based on needs or desires, and it's going to result in an intention to attain an appropriate goal. So maybe our goal is to eat lunch today, right? That's our need. Our need is going to drive our motive, and our motive is going to be, go get some food and then eat it, right? So that's a very basic biological need. We might have more advanced things. So maybe you have the desire to own a fancy house. So because you have that desire, it's going to give you a motive to work hard, save up your money to get that down payment, and then achieve that goal. So there is the need theory of motivation. The central idea of this need theory is that unsatisfied needs motivate us. The problem with the need theory is that once those needs have been satisfied, then typically we run out of motivation for that specific task. It's kind of a cycle. As they become satisfied, we don't necessarily have that need anymore. Basically what we want to... So the central idea then of that need theory is that unsatisfied needs motivate us until they become satisfied. So our next slide here shows us the needs cycle. So you can see here, if we start with the need, that's a person experiencing a craving, a desire, or a need, right? The thing that they want to achieve. This need gives them drive. The person is experiencing a tension or an anxiety or a drive to satisfy that need. That means that the person's going to take some action. They're going to engage in goal-seeking behavior. They're going to try to meet that need. And then once the need is met, we're in the satisfaction phase. So the person experiences a reduction of that drive and a satisfaction of the original need. And then we're back to square one. We need another need to drive that drive. So this cycle explains why once you've achieved a goal, sometimes people feel really empty or purposeless, like they don't have anything to do. And that also explains why once someone achieves a goal, they often start looking right away towards their next goal. They want something to do. So just bumping back to this slide then, that needs and drive is all basically aiming to reduce that anxiety of the need. This whole cycle also has a role with self-interest. So we'll often ask ourselves, well, what's in it for me, right? If we're not doing, we need to be doing something that we get a benefit out of it in order to do it. Most people don't want to do something that feels pointless or, doesn't serve them. So, there are lots of important needs and motives that might be, influential in creating goals or striving for success. So maybe you'll see yourselves in some of these needs or motives. So for some people, achievement is a specific need that that motivates them. So achievement is defined as a desire to accomplish something difficult for its own sake, right? So that's that, like, hard things are worth doing. It feels good to do something that's difficult, right? People with this achievement need will often be responsibility seekers. They want to be the person that is the boss, is the CEO. They want to work their way up through the company. These people also think of how to do a job better. They look for ways to improve. And typically they will progress in their careers. So they're going to end up getting a lot of monetary rewards as well. And that serves as a form of feedback, telling them, hey, you are achieving. Look how much money you're making, right? Money is definitely a motivator in our capitalist society. And then these people, achievement seekers, tend to set realistic and moderately difficult goals. And they also take calculated risks and need feedback on their performance. So since they set realistic goals, they tend to achieve them. Since they're moderately difficult, it means that they're striving for maybe just a little bit beyond their reach, and often they will make those goals as well. And we talk about risk a little bit later on, but calculated risk can have some really big payoffs as well for these people. And then, of course, getting feedback on their performance is something that does motivate and further that drive for achievement. So another important need that some people have is a need for power. So people with a high power need to feel that they control resources. So that could include resources such as other people or money. When we talk about controlling resources such as other people, we're usually talking about people that are in a boss or leadership role kind of situation. So successful executives typically have high power motives. That makes sense, right? They're usually at the top of the company. They have that need or desire to work with other people and lead other people. And usually executives exhibit these three characteristics. So they act with vigor and determination to exert their power, right? They have the power and they want to use it. They invest time in thinking about ways to change behaviors and thinking of others, right? How can we motivate our employees? How can we, give them rewards to get more work out of them? That kind of thing. How can we use human relations to kind of control what they do or improve the ways that they work? People with power needs typically care about personal standing with those around them, and they like to occupy high-level positions and feel influential. I think that makes sense, right? If you look like the politicians, the executives, the CEOs that you see in the news and hear about, I think these things define them pretty clearly, right? It seems like they like having that high position. They want the fancy cars, the big house, the beautiful spouse, the perfect children. All those things kind of go along with that need for power, right? They want to seem influential. So another important need, another different type is called affiliation. So people with an affiliation need want to build relationships. So these people tend to be really loyal as employees or as friends or / family members. So people with the affiliation need don't necessarily stick around a company because they are trying to work their way up to the top, like a power person. They don't necessarily hang around because they feel like they can get that achievement of, completing projects there. Typically, they hang around because they like their family at the office, right? So their office gang membership, right? They feel loyal to their employer. So these people also tend to prefer group work. They like to work together as teams, which is a good thing for companies. And affiliation is like a fairly strong need for a lot of people. And you'll see that this it can be used as a motivator for people. So I don't know if you've ever worked for a company that offers incentives for how long you've been working for the company. I'm trying to think of example. Like my dad got like a fancy watch after being with his company for like 25 years, that kind of thing. So they often companies will try to build that affiliation and use that as part of a motivation to keep their loyal employees. Okay, recognition is another need type that I think probably lots of people really have. So people that have a recognition need type, they want to be acknowledged for their contribution and efforts. So who of us don't want that, right? So lots of the time, people feel like they're underappreciated, that they're not getting the recognition that they deserve for the work that they've done. I feel like that's a pretty standard complaint across the board. I'm not sure. I've really heard a lot of people be like, you know what, I feel like my company really appreciates the hard work I do. A lot of the time you hear, I don't even think they know how hard I work, and they don't appreciate how much I do for them and stuff like that, right? So the need for recognition is so pervasive. Pervasive means that so many people have this need that companies often have recognition programs. So, employee of the month, that kind of thing is a recognition program. Order is another need type that lots of people may have. And order is a strong need to put things in order. So basically, like tidying up, making things organized, balanced, neat, precise, etc. So that one can often be met just by tidying up your desk, I think is the example that they give in the textbook. Certainly, I like to be pretty neat. It drives me nuts when I look around my house and it's just toys everywhere, right? I'd really much rather have them in their bins and put away because it's just so much more peaceful to me, right? So I have that need for order. My husband always makes fun of me because when I go to a store, if let's say he's looking at something or whatever, I'll sit there and organize the stuff next to him, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, just tidying the shelves. He's like, you don't work here. I'm like, I know, but it looks so messy, I want to clean it up. So order is definitely one of my needs, and I'm motivated to tidy things up because of that. Okay, and then risk-taking and thrill-seeking. So some people just really want that thrill, or they're willing to take the risk to get the thrill. I'll tell you right now, I am pretty risk-averse. I don't really like the idea of possibly losing money or being injured. I don't like those kind of things. So people with a risk... I'm trying to think of the word, I guess thrill seeking, we'll just go with what it says on the page here. They really need a lot of constant excitement. So people in the vet world that might be more of a thrill seeker, risk taking person probably want to work high stakes medicine, like emergency medicine, or referral, where it's the stakes are a lot higher because the cases are a lot trickier. I'm perfectly happy working in my just day-to-day practice because I'm not really keen on that thrill-seeking techniques, right? So sometimes these people are even willing to risk their lives to achieve thrills. Again, not me. That's totally not me. They like to search for that giant payoff, right? So this can really pay off in some industries. So one of the examples they give is the high technology area. So taking those big risks can really pay off for them. There are good consequences for an organization being willing to work with these risk-taking, thrill-seeking people. Big risks can have big payoffs, right? Just think like gambling, right? So with gambling, if you make a big bet, like a large bet on, let's say the single horse or something in the horse race, and that horse wins, you can really turn that into some big money. If you bet on the long shot, it can really come through for you and you can earn quite a bit back. So there are payoffs, right, for big risks. There are also, though, sometimes really negative consequences, right? Risk-taking people, thrill-seeking people are more likely to get into accidents or make bad decisions that crash, right? So risk-taking, there's a balance. You're either going to really succeed or really fail. It's really extreme, the two. So we see with... there you go. Sorry. We see that needs and motivations can really vary based on what generation you belong to. And a lot of that is based on values, right? So the example they give here is baby boomers versus Generation X. And that can be really, really true, definitely. Like, so I look at like my grandparents, for instance. My grandparents' needs and motives was safety and security. They were very concerned about where their next meals were coming from, even though they had a fair bit of money in the bank. They were always very concerned about that. And when they died, they actually had quite a lot of resources. But because they grew up during the Great Depression, they really felt like they couldn't let anything go to waste and that they had to be very careful about the choices that they made because they didn't want to run any risk of losing things, right? Losing any of the stuff that they had worked so hard for. And that makes sense based on their generational experience, right? They lived through a really tough time and their values then are reflected by that, right? So here we have the definition of value. It's the importance that a person attaches to something, and that serves as a guide to action. So they place importance on safety and stability because they didn't have that when they were younger, because they were living during the Great Depression time, where food was a lot more scarce. Money was harder to come by. Jobs weren't really readily available. So that makes a big difference, right? So if we contrast that, and one other thing is that people from older generations then tend to be really loyal to their companies because they don't want to run the risk of leaving that company and then not being able to find another job. So if we contrast that with people of a younger generation, people that are, coming into the workforce now, we're seeing people that really value a work-life balance. They're not necessarily loyal to a company because they're more looking for what's going to benefit me. I want to be able to have like part-time or flexible hours because I have children, right? I don't necessarily feel that loyalty the way my grandparents would to companies that they worked for. I feel like it's probably really rare. I think moving forward, like it wasn't uncommon for like our grandparents, let's say, to have, worked a job for 50, 60, 70 years. I really doubt that's going to be the case with newer generations because if we see an opportunity elsewhere, we're going to strive for that. So there's a lot more of that individual value that younger generations have versus that like safety, stability, and loyalty values that the older generations have. So definitely generational things are going to come into play in the workforce then because we're going to see different people having different values, different needs, and different motives then. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Maslow's need hierarchy. Maybe you guys have heard about this before. I definitely see mention of it in like social media posts and stuff. It's pretty common. I would not be surprised if you didn't already have some exposure to this. So the needs hierarchy kind of helps to explain human motivation. So at the very base level that builds the pyramid, right, is physiological needs. So that's things like, food, water, procreation, that kind of thing, shelter. And then right above that, we have safety. So things like a safe place to sleep at night, some shelter, not being attacked or, injured by others, that kind of thing. And then as we move higher up the pyramid, we get to the more higher order needs. So things like a social aspect, I guess. So a feeling of belonging, a feeling of love. Following that, we have esteem. So feeling good about yourself, good about the things that you can achieve. And then lastly, self-actualization. So self-actualization is being the best you can be, kind of thing, right? So we can see that as we go up the pyramid, things become more difficult to obtain, right? And we also see that we're not going to build up the pyramid if we don't have our bases, right? So a person that is unable to meet their physiological needs, that are hungry, that are not feeling safe because they don't have a safe home or a safe community, they're not going to be able to move on to these higher things like self-actualization or self-esteem based on their achievements and self-confidence, right? So there you go. Sorry. We need to have those bases before we can move our way up to those higher order needs. So we're just going to look a little bit more closely at each level. So physiological needs are things we already talked about. These are our bodily needs. So food, water, shelter, and sleep. That's the very basic thing. If we're talking about self-care, we need to check in on our physiological needs. Have you eaten today? Have you drank enough water? Have you gotten some sleep? Right? Those are all really important when we're talking about our self-care, right? Oopsie. Hi. Wait a second. Okay, so moving on to the next tier, I guess, in the pyramid is our safety needs. So that's referring to actual physical safety and a feeling of being safe from physical and emotional injury. So if you are working for a place that maybe you have a boss that is like a real bully, maybe they're like emotionally abusive to you, you will not have your safety needs met, and you're not going to be able to work your way up that pyramid into like, self-esteem, self-actualization. The next tier up is social needs. So these are finding belonging in a company or a family or friends, and these center around the person's interaction with other people, right? So I think human beings are a very social animal, and we tend to really crave those social needs. Esteem needs, these are the individual's demands to be seen as a person of worth by others to themselves. Feeling competent in the things that you do, feeling confident in your skills, those are all parts of self-esteem. And then self-actualization, those are needs for self-fulfillment and personal development. So this is where we can really start to reach those high-level goals, things like, becoming the executive of the company. That you're not going to really achieve that if you're worried about where your next meal comes from, right? So this hierarchy of needs does imply that most people think of a job as a way of obtaining the necessities of life, okay? So once we, not ideally, but I think ultimately all of us have a job because we need money to pay the bills, to feed our kids, to put a roof over our heads. That's the very basic reason we all have jobs. Like, if you remove the need for those things, I can see a lot of people not really necessarily wanting to work if that job isn't really meeting any of their higher level needs, right? So when we're looking at those higher level needs, things like esteem and those social needs and self-actualization, if you're, I'm sure you've heard of like soul-sucking jobs, right? If you have a soul-sucking job, that's not really going to meet those needs for you. So you're probably going to be looking elsewhere for a job that does motivate you. So, moving on then, we're going to start talking about goals and motivation. So successful people have one thing in common. At some point in their life, they sat down and wrote out their goals. So I do think writing out goals can be a really helpful tool to help you really visualize where you want to go in your future. Goals don't have to be just about work. You can have work goals, you can have personal goals, you can have creative goals. Like if you have a hobby, there's something you want to achieve within your hobby. You could have like, I don't know, like physical, like strength goals or something. Like if you're pretty motivated by exercise, you might really want to be like, I'm going to run the marathon, or I'm going to lift 500 pounds. I don't know. That might be a ridiculous number. I'm not really a fitness person, but so basically goals are really inseparable from motivation. And we talked about that cycle, right? And we talked about goal-seeking behavior, and that comes from our drive, which comes from our needs. So those things are all really a big part of motivation. So someone that is highly motivated tends to be in pursuit of a specific goal. So a goal is an event, a circumstance, an object, or a condition that a person is striving to attain, and it reflects your desire or intention to regulate your actions. So let's move on and talk about goals a little bit. So the advantage of goals, there's lots. If you set specific, reasonably difficult goals, you're going to improve your performance and chances of success. You have something you're working towards, you tend to work towards it. Goals can help focus our efforts in a consistent direction. There might be a lot of things you're interested in, but if we really focus and hone in on one of those, you can go very far in it, right? So it can help us to focus in one direction, or a few directions if you have a couple goals. Goals that we set can serve as a standard to indicate when we've done a satisfactory job, right? It feels good to meet the goal, get the check mark, and move on. So setting goals can be really motivating to get that feedback of like job done. And goals serve as self-motivators and energizers because the energy is being invested in something worthwhile. How many of you have set a goal and achieved it and it feels really good and you feel so like, wow, I could tackle the world right now. I just did that. That was so challenging, right? Like, I'm sure every time you complete a course and you get a good grade on it, it feels really motivating. You feel energized to tackle the next one, right? And when you finally graduate, that's going to feel amazing because you've achieved the goal of finishing school. And now you can move on to finding a career in your job, and that's going to feel really good too. So goals are definitely motivators. Also, people that are goal-oriented, which means they like to achieve things, they often have a better job performance. So they are pretty keen about learning and acquiring new skills and mastering new situations. These people are also more likely to seek feedback about how they're doing, and that leads to a higher performance as well, right? So someone that has a goal is going to learn new tasks or get better at tasks that they aren't awesome at because they want to meet that goal. They also want the feedback so that they know where they can improve, and that's just only a good thing for companies because then you're going to have employees that are working harder and working better. We also see better performance out of people that are goal-oriented. So they demonstrate and validate the adequacy of competence and tend to seek favorable judgment, right? Because they want to achieve those goals. Oopsie. So goal setting on the job. Goals, we want to set goals that fit into the overall mission of the firm, right? So we want our goals to be relevant to our position and to our job and to our companies. So I talked a little bit before about social media with you guys, right? Maybe that's a goal that you have that you would like to achieve for your clinic, is to have a social media presence. So that's something that could fit with the overall mission of the firm, because part of that mission might be getting in new clients or educating people. So you can really kind of focus that marketing to the people that are in your social media. So that's a goal that totally fits with the mission of your job or of your company. But if you had like a goal of, I don't even know, I can't even think of like an example of like a bad goal. Like, I don't know. I just feel like all the bad goals would just be bad things. I don't even want to try to guess any. So we'll just leave it at that. But we want to make sure our goals are fitting in with the purpose of our job. And then we can also set personal goals as well. It doesn't just have to be about career. We want a rewarding personal life as well as our career life, right? And ideally, it's nice if we can have a little bit of both, where those goals are synergistic, right? Where they kind of blend together and complement each other. So we could have personal goals relating to our family and social life. So let's say you have a goal of like becoming a better public speaker, to like give speeches at, weddings and retirement parties and etc. That's something that could certainly translate into better performance on the job, right? Perhaps you have hobbies or interests. You could set goals in there as well. Your physical and your mental health. I don't think health goals are ever a bad thing. You could have career goals and financial goals as well. Financial goals and career goals, I feel like, are tied hand in hand, right? Because what pays for your financial goals? Your career. So, some guidelines for goal setting. Have you guys heard about SMART goals before? So SMART is like an memory mnemonic, I guess. It's each letter stands for something. So S stands for specific. We want to set specific goals where we aren't just saying like, my goal is to be a better person. Well, how could you be a better person? What are areas that you are lacking in? Okay, well, maybe I need to, not yell at people or something, right? Like not swear, I don't know. So you want to have a specific goal, not really vague. Like a vague goal for a business would be like, we want to increase customers. Okay. How many customers do you want to increase it by? Like, how are you going to do that, right? So S is specific, M is measurable. We want to set goals that we can actually measure. So again, I want to be a better person. How do you measure that? I want to, swear no more than one time a day. That's measurable, right? We also want our goals to be achievable. So again, for a business example, I don't want to say like, okay, well, I want to increase sales by 10% is maybe a reasonable goal. I want to increase sales by 2,000%. That's really unreasonable and really unachievable, right? You can't do that. We want our goals to be relevant to the company or to ourselves, and also realistic. So R can have either meaning, realistic or relevant. Again, a realistic goal of 2,000% increase in sales is unrealistic. 10%, that's a more realistic goal. And we want our goals to be time-bound. That's the last letter is T. So time-bound means we're giving ourselves a deadline to achieve that goal. So maybe our timeline is 10 years from now. Maybe our timeline is in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so you can have really short-term goals. This week I want to do whatever. This month, this quarter, next year, 5 years, 10 years. You can have any timeline, but we want our goals to be time-bound because we're more likely to actually achieve them then. So some of the guidelines here from the textbook, we're going to form an action plan on how to reach your goals. So especially with a long-term goal, they usually tend to be bigger, right? So maybe a goal is to like purchase a house or like get a promotion. So what are some things you can do to get to that point? So we need to make an action plan. We also need to prioritize those different steps of the plan and see which ones can be done in what order. We want to formulate specific goals, and we want them expressed as a positive statement. So positive goals are more likely to be achieved than a negatively stated goal. So a positive goal, I want to increase sales. I want to, get a promotion, those kind of things. I want to increase healthy behavior like exercise. You want your goals to be concise, which means that they're short, punchy statements. So for instance, my husband and I we did not meet this goal, but we used to joke that our goal was mortgage free by 33, right? That's a punchy little goal right there. It didn't happen, so we've bumped it to 43 now. Anyways, we want our goals to be realistic. So 33, maybe not so realistic. 43 is not that bad though. But it's also good to have that stretch goal, right? So, my goal is this, but if I could take it a step further, I would also do that, right? You want to set goals for different time periods. So, short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And it's totally reasonable to have a little bit of fantasy in your goal setting, especially with your personal goals. So, okay, I want to buy a house, but maybe I'd like to buy a house like with a pool and a tower or something like that, right? Have a little bit of fantasy in there because it doesn't hurt to strive. You know what they say, like shoot for the moon, you'll land among the stars, right? And then if you can be really specific about your goal, stating the what, the who, the when, the how, and then review those periodically, you're more likely to achieve those goals. So, unfortunately, although goal setting is generally really positive, there are some problems that could be created by having goals. So, sometimes people that have goals set become really inflexible and they're not willing to work with other people or consider other actions because those don't serve meeting their goal, right? I have a cartoon example for you. If you've seen The Princess and the Frog. So Tiana is really inflexible in her goal of achieving her restaurant in that she does not want to go out with her friends. She's just really narrow-minded and working hard, doing, double, triple shifts, trying to make the money to get her restaurant, right? So that's just a little silly cartoon example, but it applies. That makes that also fits the next one, a narrow focus and neglecting of other worthwhile activities. So it's good to have balance in your life. You don't want to be strictly only ever working for that one goal. Sometimes it can detract from an interest in the task. If you're really hyper-focused on that goal, it can kind of just become too daunting. And especially if your goals aren't very realistic, it can really burn you out. Yeah, you can't chew that. Sorry, bud. Sorry about that. So sometimes having a goal that isn't really necessarily very achievable can really detract from the interest in the task. Case in point, like basically all New Year's resolutions ever. People are always like, I'm going to lose 100 pounds this year. And then it's way too unrealistic and they end up losing interest in the task within like a month. Being too motivated by being too goal-driven like that can really interfere with relaxation because people aren't necessarily willing then to take that break because they're too busy doing that drive. So that can be a negative thing as well, right? We need to make sure we're still taking care of our needs. Sometimes goals can encourage unethical behavior, right? How many movies have you seen where it's like, oh my God, we didn't meet our quarterly goals. Let's do a little bit of sneaky beak behavior here to trick the numbers or whatever, right? So unethical behavior, it's kind of like looking at like the means justify the ends, but that's not necessarily always going to be very ethical. Sometimes then people have a total disregard then for how that goal is attained. So we don't want to get to the point where we're acting unethically because of our goals, just for the sake of achieving them. So we need to build self-motivation then. Goal setting is part of that. Looking at our needs, our wants, our desires is part of that. And one thing that we need to know is that having low motivation means that we're not going to really have satisfying careers. We're not going to really reach our potential. So we have some techniques for improving self-motivation. So number one is set those goals, meet those needs, right? Identify what you're working towards will help you to stay motivated to work. If we can find intrinsically motivating work, you know how people say, do what you love and you won't ever work a day in your life or whatever, right? So if you can find a job that you do really enjoy doing, it doesn't really even feel like work, and that can be motivating. So when something is intrinsically motivating, it means that the work itself is enjoyable. Getting feedback on your performance can be motivating. It gives you areas to strive to be better, and it tells you what you're doing well, which fuels that recognition need, right? You could apply behavior modification to improve your skills. So that is like the idea of rewards, right? So if I meet this goal, I can go out for a nice dinner. If I meet this goal, I can reward myself with a continuing education thing and learn something new, right? You can raise your level of self-expectation. I like to think of this with my children, right? Like if my expectations of them are low, they're gonna meet them. If my expectations of them are high, they're gonna meet them, right? So why have your expectations set low? So striving for better is always a good thing. You can develop a strong work ethic by deciding that work is important and that work has value. So that's one way to develop a strong work ethic. And then developing psychological hardiness. So we want to make sure that we're, again, taking care of ourselves, right? So we want to focus on our self-care. We want to focus on building that positive outlook. I mean, I'm one to talk. I feel like I'm a pretty negative person. But we want to build that positive outlook on life and have that psychological hardiness. So to do that, psychological hardiness we can develop with the 3 C's. So commitment. The commitment is the tendency to involve yourself in whatever you're doing or encountering, right? So you want to achieve this goal, you're committed to it. That will build that hardiness. Control is the 2nd C. Often people that feel like life happens to them, that it's like a matter of luck or circumstance, they tend to feel rather helpless and don't have a great work ethic. If you believe that you're, in control of your destiny, that makes you feel influential in your life, and that builds that psychological hardiness as well. And then challenge. If you believe that change is like a healthy part of life, you're more likely to embrace those challenges and do better in your life. And real talk, guys, change is always a normal part of your life. You're always going to have those little challenges. And then lastly, we need to develop self-discipline. So developing self-discipline is really important because achieving goals and staying motivated requires that self-discipline. So self-discipline is the ability to work systematically and progressively towards a goal until it's achieved. So some people have more self-discipline than others, but fortunately there is techniques in which we can develop our self-discipline a little bit more. So number 1 is having a mission statement related to your life. So if you can think about the things that really motivate you, the needs you have, you can focus in and create that self-discipline with the mission statement, okay? A mission statement helps to keep us on track. You can also develop role models. So people that already have good self-discipline, you can kind of model what they do, use them as someone to look up to, copy them, and then build on that as well. Developing goals for each task helps to keep you on track and gives you that self-discipline as well. Just having like a big goal, I want to increase sales by 10%. Well, how? Okay, well, if we look at all the, break it down into smaller tasks. Having the smaller tasks are also going to give you an action plan then to achieve your goals. You can use visual and sensory stimulation. So that's like, like visualizing and self-actualizing and all that. That's kind of where that comes in. So like people will sometimes like make a vision board. That'll help to keep them on track with their goals, keep that self-discipline on track. If we look for intrinsic motivation, that pleasure within each task, that helps us to have the self-discipline. Because if we enjoy each task that we do, we're more likely to want to do those tasks. And then we want to compartmentalize the spheres of our life. The people that achieve their goals the most are really good at staying focused because they focus on the thing that they're doing. When they're at work, they're focused at work. When they're at home, they're focused at home. So they're not bringing work home with them. They're not focusing on, that nasty customer from earlier today. And same with at work. They're not bringing their, maybe you had a fight with your significant other before you went to work or something. You leave that at home, deal with your work stuff, come home, deal with your life stuff, right? And then lastly, I think we're all probably guilty of this to some extent, is minimizing excuse making. I'm a really bad procrastinator. I can always find all the excuses to not complete something I'm not really keen on doing. So I'm a person that's like, oh, I got to set up classes for tomorrow. Sure, yeah, no problem. But you know what? I should really probably do the dishes first. I'm like, I hate cleaning the bathrooms. That's like my least favorite chore. I will literally do every other chore in the house on the day that I have like clean bathrooms on my to-do list, because I would rather do anything else besides that, right? So if we can minimize those excuses, we're more likely to get our goals achieved. So that's our lecture for chapter 2. I just want to talk to you a little bit about our journal entry today. Okay, I'll get you one in a moment. Go watch your show. So our journal prompt, guess what it's all about? It's about goals. So our journal prompt for today, I provided you with a link in your Brightspace classroom. It has an article about setting SMART goals. I would like you to read that article, and then I'd like you to consider what goals you might have in each of the 9 categories. So you're going to put today's date at the top of the page. You are going to write these 9 different headings, and then you're going to write out your SMART goal for each of the 9 categories. So they could be short-term, medium-term, or long-term goals, or a little bit of each, right? Like maybe you have like, you know, I don't know, I'm just looking here. Maybe you have a financial goal to like pay off your house or something like that, right? So how could you achieve that in smaller steps? You're certainly welcome to break those goals down as well. So I do want to see these goals be SMART, right? So they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant/realistic, and time-bound, okay? So we're going to talk about our career goals. So what level do you want to reach in your career, or what do you want to achieve? And it's okay if you don't have like a long-term vision on this. Right now, your career goal might be graduate school, get a job as a VOTA, right? And that's okay. Maybe long-term, like for myself, I wanted to graduate and become an RVT. I did. But I always had kind of in the back of my head as a long-term goal to teach in vet medicine. So that's something that like now I've achieved in my career, which is amazing. So it's okay if you don't have a higher level thing that you're trying to strive for. If your next goal is just get the job, that's an awesome goal. We have financial goals. So maybe how much do you want to earn? When would you like to earn it by? How can that relate to your career goals as well, right? Education, is there any knowledge in particular you want to acquire? What skills will you need to have to achieve other goals, right? So again, you guys are all kind of working on education goals right now, but maybe there's something you'd really like to specialize in as you move forward in your career. So family life goals, would you like to be a parent? Like what kind of parent would you like to be? How do you want to be seen by your partner or members of your family, etc.? So what kind of family goals might you have? Artistic goals, is there any kind of creative outlook you like to look at? Maybe that's like a hobby thing. I'm okay with that too. Attitudes, so like for myself, I think I tend to be fairly negative about things. I tend to jump to the worst conclusion and be a worrier, so that's something that I could certainly build some goals around. So is there any part of your mindset that holds you back? Is there any part of the way that you behave that upsets you? And if so, set a goal to improve your behavior or find a solution to the problem. So physical goals, are there athletic or health goals that you want to achieve? What steps can you take to achieve them? Pleasure goals, how do you want to enjoy yourself, right? So often pleasure goals. Pleasure goals, how do you want to enjoy yourself? Often people have pleasure goals that include travel or vacation, right? So that's often a goal people are working towards. And then public service, do you want to make the world a better place? And if so, how? Do you have any goals in terms of your, philanthropy or something like that? Okay, so that is our journal prompt for today, is looking into those 9 categories and setting goals related to those. Again, make sure they're SMART. So they're going to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant or realistic, and time-bound, okay? So if you do have any questions from this lecture or about the journal prompt, I am available in the chat. I'm available in the virtual classroom, and you can always email me. So please reach out if you do have questions. Thank you so much for listening.